Welcome back to Sunday Vibes, one and all. We're not back in the pub just yet. We're still self-isolating, so this is coming to you from our own houses. But as ever, me, Chris and Pat are here to answer your burning questions. The first burning question was sent in by Billy Bob12, who says, who is the most disrespected player in Premier League history? Firstly, boys, how are we all doing? Hamill, how are you? Any signs of illness yet?
No. I've had a shave, I've washed my face, didn't have time for a shower and to do a bit of show prep. So went for a halfway house. I'm feeling good. I'm raring to go, baby.
Okay, Pato?
Yeah, good. I also had a shave. It was getting extreme, but I'm still building up confidence for the home haircut. So
Yeah, hence why I've got a hat on. I won't be revealing it. I did reveal it on extra time, and then I watched the footage back, and it's a huge mistake. Absolutely monstrous mistake to get my hair out, and I left my hair out for the whole episode. So I just look horrific. Don't let your girlfriend cut your hair with beard trimmers.
It didn't look too bad. You looked a bit like one of those cheese strings that's two different shades, two different flavours of cheese, but...
Absolutely shocking it is, mate, because I've got no half values on the thing, so it just... And then she cut my ear open, so it's absolutely disastrous. Absolutely disastrous. Right, let's get on with the question then. Hamill, who do you think is the most disrespected player in Premier League history?
I addressed this on a single season basis. I didn't go historical because I thought one of you boys might do that. And I've picked a player who I really wanted him to make it at the time. It was a time when the Premier League was hemorrhaging an awful lot of stars to La Liga. So it felt like a bit of a reversal when Manchester United signed Angel Di Maria for a then British fee of 59.7 mil. Although Transfermarkt has it down as 67 mil, so not sure if there was any add-ons there that you had to pay. I mean, if it was triggered by appearances, yeah, I'm not sure if he got there or not. So just to paint a really basic picture for our fans that are under the age of 25, United won the league in 12-13 in Fergie's last season, then obviously hired David Moyes, the chosen one finishing 7th, so that prompted the United board to sack him, hire Louis van Gaal on a 3-year deal with Giggs as his assistant, who retired that season, right? I think Van Gaal had just been with the national team, Pat, reaching the semi-finals of the World Cup, if memory serves me correctly. That was the World Cup, right, where he brought Tim Krul on in the quarterfinals against Costa Rica, and Tim Krul ended up saving like a bunch of penalties, right?
yeah, for Jasper Cillessen, he brought him on. But he did it. I think he did it. No, he wanted to do it against Argentina and he couldn't. I think he'd used all his subs, and that was when the Netherlands went out.
Yeah, you crashed out in another penalty shootout to Argentina, didn't you? So he got the Glazers' attention in the World Cup, a decent showing from a limited Dutch squad, and they clearly trusted him because they gave him an absolute bloody war chest, didn't they? Di Maria, like we said, cost a pretty penny. And then a further 98 million on Luke Shaw, Ander Herrera, Daley Blind and Marcus Rojo. What a summer. Joseph, if you could sign one of those players again, if you had to sign one of those players again, who would it be?
Probably Ander Herrera, maybe. Did an alright job for us in there. Did an alright job for us in central midfield. A bit of like a squad player. I think, was he 30 odd million? Maybe Luke Shaw. You know, Luke Shaw's actually had a little bit of a renaissance recently, hasn't he? Playing that sort of left centre-back role in a back three, and has actually looked alright as a left-back. So now he's finally getting back to a bit of full fitness pre-corona. Maybe Luke Shaw, yeah, between Luke Shaw and Ander Herrera, I'd say.
But this is still disrespect. I mean, like, this was Di Maria coming off an unbelievable season. You've got to say peak Di Maria.
Oh, I didn't think Di Maria was included in those options.
Also, do you think any of those signings have aged well? You know, Daley Blind, might have been worth keeping him around, for example.
He definitely shouldn't have been sold when he was sold, and for the fee he was sold for. I think we sold him back to Ajax for like 10 to 15 million, something like that. I don't think we made any money on him. And yeah, he is definitely a player that should have been kept when others were kept. You know, we kept the likes of Jones and Smalling and Rojo, and we decided to flog Daley Blind, who's an infinitely better player. But effectively, Daley's biggest problem was Was he a defensive midfielder? Was he a centre-back at the time? Probably not physical enough in the Premier League to be a centre-back at his height. And you can maybe get away with that a little bit more in the Eredivisie and playing in Europe when you're in a far, far better ball-retaining system, which he's great at, isn't he? He's good with the ball at his feet and the ability to play out from the back. But when you're being physically dominant against Chris Wood, he sometimes struggled with that. So Premier League maybe didn't suit his skill set as much as it could have. He probably would have been better off going to La Liga or somewhere like that.
Yeah, it made sense at the time, didn't it? Because Louis van Gaal's systems have always been very ball dominant, to the point where you no longer want to watch sometimes. Memories of Bayern there, evoking memories of Bayern. Anyway, like Pat said, you can't really blame Van Gaal for going for Di Maria at that time, spending that money. The Argentine contributing to 21 goals in 27 starts for Real Madrid. Bit criminal that it was only starting 27 times in La Liga, to be honest. And 8 in 9 in the UCL as well. Playing on that right-hand side of the midfield three was just unreal. And he started really bloody well, didn't he, at Manchester United? Everyone remembers the chip against Leicester. Absolutely gorgeous. Directly involved in 9 goals in his first 9 Premier League appearances. That was 3 goals and 6 assists. However, the form did significantly dip. Mustered just 5 Premier League assists for the rest of the season with no goals. So most of his performances, good performances, were in those opening exchanges. But he did get injured, didn't he? He did pick up that hamstring injury. Di Maria has publicly criticised Van Gaal since for playing him in a number of positions. Played him as a second striker, 10 on the left, on the right. Van Gaal has said that is actually evidence of how much I tried to get to work Di Maria into my team, how many opportunities he was afforded. So no one is ready to take the blame for that signing. But still, regardless of how it finished, United had a lacklustre season despite finishing 4th. They got Champions League football again, okay. But he finished the season with 13 goal contributions in 20 starts. Robin van Persie, by comparison, got 12 in 500 more minutes. He had an expected goals and assist ratio of 0.56, which is basically Bernardo Silva's output in 18-19. So maybe deserving of a few more assists. Maybe if there was a fit Robin van Persie up front, maybe if Wayne Rooney had been able to play in 10 like Louis van Gaal wanted, his output would have been even better. 1.9 key passes per 90, that was a team high. And like I said, it's got a little bit ugly in public since. I mean, when you're Angel Di Maria and you finish the season being replaced by Ashley Young, it probably does leave a sour taste in the mouth. I've got a few more numbers down here that I'll read off in a minute. But what are your memories, boys? Maybe starting with you, Pat, of Di Maria that season. Were you disappointed it didn't work out?
I mean, it's always funny when a big move for Man United doesn't work out. So I was kind of pleased about it. I was pleased when he got benched because he was really dangerous every time we played against him. He also assisted against us when we beat United at Old Trafford in the FA Cup. And I remember him coming off in the second half and it was like, oh no, he got sent off, I think. And it was a relief. Like he was dangerous all game long. I mean, the goal against Leicester, it kind of got overshadowed because of the eventual 5-3 result. But the goal was unbelievable. And to me, it just always felt like he was an odd fit for Van Gaal. Like, I mean, in that Real Madrid side, he had that kind of free role, like powering up the left of the midfield three, like as Ronaldo cut in. And he would just blow defenses up. Like, he could go past people. He was an amazing creator. He also had an incredible shot. Like, in Van Gaal's system, he wanted people to play really consistent, rigid roles, and Di Maria was not the right guy for that. So, I don't know. I remember being disappointed that we didn't see the best from him, and I was shocked when they sold him at a significant loss after a year. But on the other hand, I'm always happy to see United waste their money.
It's weird, isn't it? Van Gaal sort of blaming it on, or people blaming it on him playing a number of positions when he's continued to do that at PSG. Actually, he's doing it under Thomas Tuchel this season. I think only 14 of his starts have been in his preferred position as the sort of attacking, floating midfield, and he's been great from there. But he's been great from a number of positions. Joe, were you devastated when you sold him for 50 odd mil to PSG?
No, not at all. Not any part of me. Yeah, I do agree to you with a level about the level of disrespect towards Angel Di Maria. It just wasn't the right fit for Man United, effectively. Great player, but sometimes great players don't always fit at that time for that club. Man United were not a particularly good side under Louis van Gaal, still not a particularly good side, but played some incredibly boring, rigid football. And you can't have Angel Di Maria in a disciplined, ball-retaining, rigid side. Doesn't work. And it especially doesn't work when you need to dig in when you're not playing well, because Di Maria is not a digger at any level. The first sign of battle, Di Maria was off the pitch. I promise you. The amount of times I watched Di Maria within the first 30 minutes get into a 50-50 challenge with somebody in the centre of the park and then have to be substituted at half-time was unfathomable. It was incredible. Did not fancy any sort of the rough and tough. People were just smashing into him and he was off. And obviously he had a lot of off-the-field problems in Manchester, and he didn't settle. Then his house got robbed, and people kind of point to that as a major contributing factor towards his second half of the season decline. But yeah, I understand what you're saying in terms of disrespect. I think he did put 6 good months of football in for Manchester United, and statistically, obviously, is a very strong player. But sometimes the context around the statistics is that he didn't want to be in Manchester, didn't want to play for Manchester United, didn't have the fight to try and drag us out of what was a poor situation for the club. And effectively, it was his decision to move. If a player doesn't want to be there, sometimes you've just got to cut your losses. We're seeing a similar sort of thing with Paul Pogba at the moment. I love Paul Pogba, one of my favourite players in world football. But if he doesn't want to play for the club, you can't force him to. You can't force him to play through injury. You can't force him to start every game. And that's what happened with Di Maria.
Yeah, he probably needed someone with, I don't know, a bit more man management to kind of maybe ease him into Premier League life. Louis van Gaal did say that he struggled with the continuous pressure. But, you know, he has worked in highly organised systems since under people like Tuchel and prospered. So I definitely think it could have.
But he's prospered at clubs where they are the most or amongst the most dominant teams in the league. In PSG, United were crap. We are like working our way out of a serious hole to try, and sometimes to work out of a serious hole, you've got to work twice as hard. You've got to get stuck in and do the nitty gritty rather than being able to play for PSG and be your flamboyant best. At Real Madrid, be your creative best. At United, sometimes it's more about the attitude because we're that rubbish.
Yeah, so just to conclude, I don't think he's the most disrespected player in Premier League history. I picked him because I was really disappointed it didn't work out. And I do think people probably don't give him enough respect for just how good a player he is. Because of that one season at Manchester United, he's very much an afterthought when people talk about top 10 creative players in Europe at current because of that ill-fated stint at Old Trafford. I was very tempted to pick Juan Sebastian Veron, but didn't have enough time for research. There's someone who actually did apply himself, but it just didn't work for one reason or another. Okay, so who's going next?
Go on, Pato, do you want to go?
Sure. I mean, I've taken a slightly different angle as well, so I've gone for one of the most disrespected players right now, because I think that you're going to take somebody who I think is the historic kind of high watermark for this. So I want to talk a bit about Alex Lacazette, because Arsenal fans, he was Arsenal's player of the season last year, and now Arsenal fans, particularly George Wright, have decided that he is useless.
On social media, Arsenal fans bang Lacazette, and he does miss some sitters.
Does he? Like, I mean, Aubameyang's missed more sitters than Lacazette this season. Like, Lacazette had a little bit of a bad finishing run after Christmas, but since Christmas, Lacazette's been involved in 4 Premier League goals, Pepe's been involved in 5, Aubameyang's been involved in 6. Like, I mean, it's not massively behind the guy that all Arsenal fans will defend to the ends of the earth. And I mean, the thing about Lacazette is he's actually been pretty consistent across his time at Arsenal. Like, I think per 90, across the whole time he's been at the club, he's contributed 0.7 goals and assists per game. Alexis Sanchez contributed 0.73. Aubameyang's on 0.78. Like, I mean, that's really, really good. And actually, since Arteta came in, Lacazette has the best XG in the squad. His shots have gone down, mostly because even though Aubameyang's been playing off the left, he is expected to get the majority of the high-value chances. But Lacazette's still putting up decent, the quality of the chances he's getting is still pretty high. And I think it's worth remembering as well that when you compare him to someone like Alexis came in at a time when his supply line consisted of Ramsey, Cazorla and Peak Ozil. Lacazette arrived for the last season of Wenger. Then he got shifted around 6 months later when Aubameyang came in. Then he got shifted around again when Emery came in. Then he got under a year and a half of Emery. Then he got a couple of weeks of Ljungberg. Now he's on to Arteta. Like, he's been moved around, dropped, turned into a scapegoat. Like, so much stuff has happened. And I mean, this season, like, he hasn't got many goals or assists, but he also hasn't played that much. Like, I think he's got 10 Premier League goals and assists. He's played 1,300 minutes. So when I was looking at it, I thought, you know what? All I hear this season is people talking about Raul Jimenez as if he's world class. Raul Jimenez has contributed to a goal every 130 minutes for Wolves this season. Lacazette's done it every 131 minutes. Like, I mean, there's functionally no difference between their output.
But do you think that the reason Lacazette has been dropped at times and left out of the team is because he has had some shitters? He has had some shocking games.
Oh, he's had some. Actually, I'd say that like Lacazette's worst game is probably better than Aubameyang's worst game. Like, yeah, of course he's had bad performances this season. Like, I'm not saying he's never had a bad performance, but I also can't think of a single player in the Premier League who hasn't had a bad performance. Like,
so 6 months ago or a year ago, he used to get a lot of praise when he wasn't, scoring a gluttonous amount of goals. He used to get a lot of praise for the defensive work he put in, the amount of, pressures, regains. So has that stopped?
No, I'd say he still presses more than Aubameyang. People love Aubameyang's pressing because every now and then you see Aubameyang like chase down the keeper. But Lacazette makes more tackles, interceptions and fouls than Aubameyang and has done throughout his whole Arsenal career. Like, quite often he actually picks up those tactical fouls early on in moves because he's the one with the intelligence to do it. And also he's playing in that more central role, so he's relied upon to press the centre-backs. But he's, I don't know, to me, he's an incredibly good link-up player. He's really good in the box. Like, he's a pretty decent dribbler. He just doesn't have pace really anymore.
Do you think he works in the current system though, Pato, that Arteta's trying to play? Like, does he warrant shifting Aubameyang out of position effectively? Is what I'm trying to say.
Well, I mean, his XG suggests that he's worth having in the side. But also, like, this idea that Aubameyang's out of position and therefore is kind of not playing as a striker, I think has been blown up by, like, pundits who don't really watch the game. Like, I mean, most of the time, like, it's not like Aubameyang's actually parked on the wing. Aubameyang comes inside and essentially plays as a striker most of the time. And I think a lot of people still think of this idea that because you start on the wing, you are a winger, you're playing as a winger, and that's not really true. Like, you look at, there are a load of clubs now, Liverpool for one, where their chief shot getter, the guy getting the majority of their shots from inside the box, is playing off the wing. And with Aubameyang, he still manages to get high value chances. There was a point early on in the Arteta thing, I think Aubameyang had scored 3 games in a row, and the commentators were whining about, he needs to play in that central area, otherwise he's not going to get enough goals. And I was like, he scored in his last 3 games. Like, what's not working about the plan? Like, don't get me wrong, I would rather have a striker playing through the middle and a proper left winger playing on the left wing. But I think for what it is, it's been like perfectly functional. I'd say the much bigger issue has been like creativity in the midfield and creativity from Ozil's role. I have much more concern about how Pepe is fitting into the side than I do about Aubameyang and Lacazette kind of having to maybe share the centre forward position.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think maybe it's just where, from a neutral's perspective, without diving into the statistics, when I watch Lacazette, he feels like a significant drop-off from Aubameyang. Just in terms of, to me, he seems like so wasteful in front of goal. And I don't even know whether that's statistically true. But when I've watched him this season, I've watched him miss chance after chance.
I think that was true just after Christmas, but I don't think it was true before. And generally in his Arsenal career, it's not been true. I mean, like, I know that statistically, he's always been in the top. That, like, Michael Carrick, I remember talking about this once. He said that in he did a little study of like people who finished above expected goals over years, and he had Lacazette in the top 10. I think that he's a better finisher than Aubameyang actually, but after Christmas he just had a
Really?
much better finisher than Aubameyang. Yeah. Like, but Aubameyang, we get more chances with Aubameyang. Lacazette's more likely to finish.
I feel like it's always Aubameyang scoring your winning goal or scoring the goal to pull you into the game. I never see Lacazette scoring you the goal that's pulling you back into the game.
Really? Like, I think that if you actually look back in Lacazette's career, especially in big games, like he's got a much better record than Aubameyang. But
would you say that Aubameyang's better at generating chances, but Lacazette's a better finisher? Is that what you're saying, or do you think Lacazette?
That is what I just said. Like, I think it's easier for us to create chances with Aubameyang there, but I think that actually there are so many times this season where I've seen Aubameyang miss a sitter. You know, like in that Europa League game for one. Like, I mean, Aubameyang's ability to miss sitters is actually.
But Aubameyang was the one that scored you the goal in the Europa League game to get you back into it, and it was a screamer.
But you could say that about Lacazette. Like, Lacazette misses a bunch of chances, but Lacazette also has scored against City, Spurs multiple times, Chelsea. Like, he's scored in basically every big game we've had. He's played. I think he scored against every big side he's played in the Premier League. Whereas Aubameyang actually hasn't done that. Like, this isn't a way of me criticising Aubameyang. It's just that Arsenal fans will defend Aubameyang even when he misses chances. When Lacazette misses chances, it's like he's a donkey.
What's he got to do to shake that narrative? Because it's very hard, isn't it, once people have you down as someone that needs 10 chances to score one goal.
Well, I think he probably will be sold because of his age. Actually, no, I think we might keep him this summer because Aubameyang's going to go. I'm not sure you can shake the narrative because the narrative isn't really about him. It's about people watching, not really paying attention. So I kind of wouldn't even want to say he needs to do something to shake it. He just needs to kind of like continue scoring at roughly the rate he is at the moment, which has started to come back a little bit lately. I think that probably if Aubameyang goes, it would help him a little bit next season because he'd be playing centre forward minutes the whole time. He'll be taking penalties. That kind of stuff helps. But fundamentally, like, it's less a point about him needing to change the way he plays and more a point about just the fickleness of supporters, and especially Arsenal supporters, who, as we know, are not the most reasonable.
Yeah, Arsenal fans have been onto it this season, haven't they?
It's like you were saying on the podcast yesterday about Mason Mount. Like, when you're kind of like heralded as a saviour early on in your career with a club, then when you have a bad run of form, it is immediately determined that you're terrible. And you hear people say things like X or Y player is better than Lacazette, and you think there are a lot of players out there who are now being talked about as better than Lacazette, who would be extremely lucky to get anywhere near the level he's had in his career.
Fair enough. I mean, my player is a little bit more historic than your two. You guys have gone for quite recent names. I've gone for Michael Carrick. I think Michael Carrick, in particular on the international scene, has had the most disrespect of not any Premier League player, but amongst the Premier League player. The fact that Michael Carrick's got one cap for England at a major tournament is nothing short of a disgrace.
Is that why you're wearing your top? Is that in protest?
He's got one cap at a major tournament for England, and that came, I think, in a game that we'd already qualified through the group. It was against Ecuador, and it was at the 2006 World Cup. Scott Parker started ahead of him at Euro 2012. Gareth Barry started ahead of him at the 2010 World Cup. This was a period where United were winning every league title, effectively, getting to nearly every single Champions League final. One cap at a major tournament, 30 caps overall. How does that happen for Michael Carrick? I actually think that Michael Carrick is one of the best defensive midfielders the Premier League's ever seen. Clinically underrated, and I think he gets disrespected because at the time his role didn't really exist. As a midfielder, you're either a box-to-box back then, you're an attacking mid, or you were a hard man. There was no sort of silky Busquets style pivot really in England.
But what about Xabi Alonso? I mean, Xabi Alonso was arguably doing that role better.
But Xabi Alonso at the time, I think, got more respect because he wasn't English. I think if Michael Carrick had been Spanish and playing the Prem, people would have been saying, look at this guy's ability on the ball. But because he was English, it was, he's not a hard man, he's not putting in tackles, he's not scoring goals, he's not running box to box. Xabi Alonso had the luxury of that sort of continental style where people were like, he's got that Spanish nature. If Carrick had come from Spain, we'd have been saying the same things.
Do you think Carrick could have played though as a lone defensive midfielder? Like, I mean, as I recall, like I don't really remember those United sides that well, but there was a lot of hard work around him. Like, there was a lot of help, and you can understand. I'm not saying Scott. Like, I don't think anyone would say Scott Parker was a better player than Carrick, but you can understand when sometimes teams leave out really good players because they need like a balance of skills.
Yeah, but what I would say is that I think Carrick would have actually balanced a lot of England's sides out better than almost anyone else. He would have allowed players like Gerrard and Lampard to progress the ball much further. Quite often, Ferguson actually just played him in a 2 in midfield with Scholes. And that allowed us to play the number of forwards that we had at the time, the likes of Berbatov, Tevez, Rooney, Ronaldo, at the same time, and just blow teams out of the water because he could use the controlling influence of Michael Carrick. And the same could have been done for England, but nobody ever tried it.
So how would you have lined up, Joe? So if you think he should have played more games for England, who would he come in at the cost of in those major tournaments, in those finals?
Well, I think there was... Everybody always harps back, don't they, and goes, Owen Hargreaves should have got more game time in that sort of defensive midfield role. I think Michael Carrick was better than Owen Hargreaves was back then. I would have played him in a 4-3-3. I know that we didn't really operate with a 4-3-3 as much back then, especially sort of like the 2008 to 2010 period. A 4-3-3 with Carrick at the base and then Lampard and Gerrard as the more attacking midfielders. I think Carrick could have done that role for England, but was never really considered. Carrick was signed by United, let's not forget, as a replacement for Roy Keane. Joined in 2006, Keane left November 2005, and people at the time, I don't really remember that well, but I would imagine we're saying the same sort of things, that he's not good enough to do it. You know, Keane's an all-action box-to-box midfielder, and how wrong could they be? United hadn't won a league title in 3 years when Michael Carrick joined. It was the period of Arsenal and Chelsea dominance. So he went on to win 3 consecutive ones as soon as he joined the team, 4 in 5 years, 3 Champions League finals. And nobody ever talks about Michael Carrick as one of the defining defensive midfielders of that era, really. He's not even in the conversation. I mean, he is amongst Manchester United fans, but I think people think, well, yeah, but United had so many better players in that team, you could have put anyone in that role, which is like what everybody says about Sergio Busquets, isn't it? Oh, you've got so many good midfielders, anybody could have played that. I could have played defensive mid.
I think also they could, like, sometimes it's a bit misleading to talk about like other midfielders getting the minutes over him, because like when you think there were loads of like pretty substandard attackers who were getting minutes for England in that period. And you do think that also, if not just that he would have benefited from being another nationality, just because if he'd had, say, a Spanish coach or a Dutch coach, I do genuinely think that they'd have said, our forwards are not that great, with the exception of a couple of guys, whereas our midfielders are amazing. So instead of trying to play like 2 or 3 forwards, we can play 1 forward and just absolutely pack the midfield and dominate the ball, like have like 75% of the ball. That's what would have happened under Del Bosque or something.
Yeah, but I do think it's odd that like Capello didn't really fancy Michael Carrick, given that he wanted control of the ball. He wanted a controlled system, very classic Italian Fabio Capello. I remember when United won, I think it was the Community Shield or League Cup, something like that, and Carrick was walking past collecting a winner's medal. Fabio Capello's going, yeah, I'll call you. Well, it's too late, Fabio. It's too late at that stage. And then Roy Hodgson, the same. He didn't want to pick Carrick because Carrick was, I think, about 30, 31 at the time, and obviously thought Scott Parker was going to do more for him in that midfield. And I just think it's unfair. I think if, like I said earlier, if Carrick had come from Spain or come from Holland, people would have been like singing his praises as a controlling defensive midfielder. Guardiola said after the 2011 final, where we got battered by Barca at Wembley, Carrick was the only player he would have taken to play in that Barcelona team.
Wow. Do you think a bit of a victim of circumstance as well as formation, obviously with England being quite wedded to 4-4-2, that the narrative, which is a word I seem to be using a lot in this episode, was the one that prevailed was Lampard, Gerrard, and how do we get Scholes in? And he was just forgotten about.
Yeah, definitely. Especially as, mate, that even happened towards the back end of the career. I think Euro 2012, Stuart Downing went. Like Stuart, we were so desperate for that left midfielder, weren't we? That Stuart Downing was getting game time on the left, and we were trying to play a flat 4 so we could get the wingers involved. It was an absolute disaster. Why Michael Carrick didn't just play the pivotal defensive midfield role for England to allow other players to thrive around him, I don't know. 30 caps is an absolute shambles. 1 cap at a tournament. disgusting. That's total disrespect on the international scene. In the Premier League, I think some people do respect him, so maybe it's a bit harsh to call him the most disrespected player ever, but I think on the international scene, very few England players have been disrespected to his level. Should we carry on then with some quick fire questions? Just a couple then. This one from Julio LFC. Are Leicester more likely to be a top 4 side over the next few years than Arsenal, United or Spurs? Hamill, you're a bit of a Leicester roots. You want to start us off?
No, they're not more likely. I think they're going to have... We've touched upon this already a little bit, so I'll be quick. I think they're going to have a massive job on their hands in order to retain whatever ground they've made up this season. I'm not going to delve into the personnel of other teams, but Jamie Vardy is 33 and he's still expected to score at this rate. And he's having, underlying numbers-wise, his second most productive season in his Leicester career. And for him to have to put up those sort of numbers just to keep Leicester within touching distance of third, and arguably they shouldn't be as comfortable as they are right now, is still quite worrying. If you're the Leicester owners and want to see them progress a sizable amount, obviously that has happened, but I don't think they're any closer to cementing their status as Champions League club as of yet. They need a big window, or maybe a couple of big windows. Johnny Evans needs replacing. We've talked about that. Ben Chilwell and James Maddison might get picked up, and then all of a sudden it's a very quick, very easy road back to Europa League football.
Yeah, I think over the last 2-3 months pre-Corona, the injuries to Wilfred and Ndidi were starting to catch up with Leicester a little bit, and his role in that Leicester team is so crucial. If he gets picked up by somebody on the continent maybe, or one of the Premier League's truly rich clubs, then that's almost the impossible role to replace.
Yeah, and I don't want to be a negative Nelly. Like, securing Champions League football means that the conversation they have with these players, with these key personnel in the summer, it's going to make it an awful lot easier to convince them to stick around, isn't it? So yes, it does help them, but that the squad is too thin to suggest that they're nailed on to carry on with this consistency 2 or 3 years down the line.
Yeah, I agree. Let's get the next one then from Daniel Root. He says, which loanees will make an impact at their parent club next season? Pato, any suggestions?
Well, I certainly hope that Hakimi does. I don't want to see Hakimi go back to Real Madrid only to sit on the bench, but at the same time, like, it's extremely hard to find his way into that team right now. On the other hand, I think that probably Ferland Mendy on the left and Hakimi on the right at this point probably has the highest ceiling as a full-back pairing among all of Real Madrid's options. I think they'll probably sell Reguilon. Also, I'd like to see Odegaard go back. Like, if they can shift James and probably Isco as well, I would definitely try and get rid of both of them. I think I would really like to see Odegaard be playing for Real Madrid, because it's hard to imagine what more he could do to impress them this season. Or at least, if they're not going to give him a place in the first team, I want them to loan him out to... I want them to sell him to like a top quality side and just see him like get a number 10 role for a really good team and a really good coach.
Do you think Ceballos will be picked up by Arsenal on a permanent?
I think it depends how much it's going to cost. Arsenal are going to have to spend quite a lot of money around the rest of the squad. I think if he went back to Real Madrid, he could be useful as well. I mean, like, he's obviously a lot more talented than Fede Valverde.
Madrid fans love Fede Valverde, though, don't they?
I know, but Valverde's been a good role player this season, but he's not actually particularly good at anything. And then people are like, well, he's a good all-rounder. It's like, is he? Because he's actually not very... He's quite bad at quite a lot of things, but he's a good dribbler and he's solid on the ball. So I think it's possible that Zidane might find a use for Ceballos, but I don't know. There's talk about him going back to Betis right now, so I have no idea, to be honest.
I think maybe Dean Henderson is in with a shout genuinely at Manchester United. I think if he comes back to Old Trafford, then it's going to be on the pretense that he pushes De Gea very hard for that number 1 spot. I think De Gea is probably being the victim of a lack of competition. People will say, yeah, well, Sergio Romero is one of the best backup goalkeepers in the world. He is, but he's so injury prone. He can't train 2 days a week. He can only put out 3 days of training a week. He's got such bad knees, he can't play more than 2 games on the bounce. So in the back of De Gea's mind, I think he probably knows that he's going to start every game. and he is still a fantastic keeper, but there have been very, very clear indications that he is starting to decline. And Dean Henderson has been showing week in, week out, arguably, that he's one of the better keepers in the Prem. He's probably in contention for one of the goalkeeping spots in the team of the year. I mean, Alisson probably takes it, doesn't he? But Henderson, with that Sheffield United side, has bailed him out plenty of times. So I think Dean Henderson is a shout for a Premier League side. Tage Tour, this one I guess for you, Pato. Who should Arsenal target as an Ozil replacement? Would Sabitzer work?
He'd be all right. Like, he's a good player. He's not a totally natural fit for that position, though he's a good defender and his creative numbers are decent this season. But I think he costs more than Pellegrini, who I think would probably be a better option. I mean, Odegaard would be the absolute dream. I don't think Arsenal would be able to get him. After that, yeah, you'd look at people like Pellegrini. I don't know, really. Like, I think it's quite difficult to find the perfect player for that role. But there'll be a scout report coming out in the next few weeks where I talk a little bit about how I think Arsenal could move on from Aubameyang. So there'll be some discussion of that in there.
Okay, let's go on to a quick personal question then, because we are going on for quite a long time today. This one from Val CPFC. What is your favourite ever album?
What was the first album you bought just to get the creative juices flowing? Because I remember that more specifically than favourite.
Millennium, Will Smith.
Millennium. Great answer.
I think the first single I ever bought was Who Let the Dogs Out by the Baja Boys.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Do you remember when HMV used to do 2 albums for 12 quid? So I think the first 2 I remember buying were Blue, All Rise, and Eminem, Curtain Call in the same trip.
That is heavy hitter. I think my favourite album, potentially No Roots, Faithless.
That's a pretty good shout. That's not what I expected from you.
Yeah, that's just because it's got so many bangers on, isn't it? So many classic tracks. What about you, Pato? Got any suggestions?
Probably Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, or Mad Villainy, MF Doom and Madlib, or maybe Mezzanine, Massive Attack. That'd be up there.
Very, very good shout, Mezzanine.
Come on, Hamill, you've got to have one. Which Kasabian album is your favourite album of all time?
Which Kasabian album? Oh, it's like picking between your children, bro.
Literally don't know what any of their albums are called. I imagine one's called Kasabian.
Yeah, the first one.
No, it's not. It's actually.
Of course it is.
I mean, I think Kendrick Lamar has been producing probably some of the best overall hip-hop albums in the last, 5 to 7 years. And when I saw him live in Budapest at Sizeget Festival, that was absolutely incredible.
There we go then. There we go. If you want to get a question answered next week, by the way, just submit it to us on Twitter. We usually put out a tweet earlier in the week on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. We're trying to shoot these as early as possible. There's not loads of footballing news, so slightly different this week. Yeah. Anything to plug? Anybody?
Just the podcast. Hit up the podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And obviously, it's now going out as a video on YouTube as well. So keep your eyes peeled for that.
Go and watch the latest episode of 1 and 1 over on Eurofootball Daily. That is filmed in a very similar setup. The latest one talks about Atalanta and how Juventus hate them.
There we have it. Thanks very much for watching Sunday Vibes. Goodbye.